What is up, everyone? My name is Brandon, guys, and this is Learning Handily. Today, we are going to make a knife. I got a cool little Skinner design I want to try out. We're going to do it. Cheers, let's get rolling. All right, so I've got a pattern here that I designed on Adobe Illustrator. It's just easier for me to get everything laid out correctly. So just cut it out with the razor blade and get it ready to go. Now I pull the steel out. I'm using a piece of 1/8 inch thick 1095. It's actually 2 inches wide. Hold it down with a magnet and get it outlined with a Sharpie. And then once that's done, I switch out the magnet and go to the center punch to get the holes ready to drill, and then we can cut this thing out. Now we work our way over to the porta band to separate our blank from the larger piece of 1095, get that out of the way so we can go to the drill press and start drilling our holes. So I am starting out with an 1/8 inch drill bit. All of the holes in the middle that are just there to basically help the epoxy hang on to the scales I'm going to be putting on are going to be an 1/8 inch. The actual pinhole is going to be 1/4 of an inch, but it's just easier to go ahead and get them started with the 1/8 inch drill bit because it goes through so much easier. Obviously, lubricating the drill bit's always important, and that's kind of what you see. And just getting through the steel. So now we move over to the porta band and get this thing cut out. I'm working on cutting to the outside of the line, and what I'll do is I'll use the grinder to go ahead and get in tighter. Here you see just making tight little cuts to help get around the curves. Alright, so now we head over to the 2x72 belt grinder. I'm using that 36 inch ceramic belt that's pretty well worn just to get this thing to shape and to get some of the nastiness gone that the porta band left. Now I've switched over to a 120 grit belt. I've got the flat work rest out of the way, using this magnet just to flat grind, get the mill scale off the steel. Oddly enough, this little magnet's one of the most useful tools I've purchased in starting this whole process. And now on to one of my least favorite activities, and that is working with a file. Because the grinder I have is kind of a budget entry-level grinder. I don't have all of the attachments that would allow me to do this with that. So I use a combination of a half-round file, and I've got a Dremel tool that I dig in there to help kind of smooth things out a little bit. Now I switch it up and go to a triangular file and then to a round file to put the little Spanish knots in. Really, it just helps with sharpening and with making sure that I get the plunge lines in the right place when it comes to grinding. And move on, go ahead and get everything measured up and laid out for the bevels. Basically, I'm going 3/4 of an inch up the spine of the knife to where the bevel should line up. And then we're gonna go ahead and get the center lines marked. So I have a 0.2 grind to try to keep these bevels straight. Onto the bevel jig, because I'm not confident enough to start my bevels by myself yet. So I use this little jig here to make sure I keep everything straight, and then I go on to freehand grinding after that once I have something I can follow. And we are back to the grinder where I get my plunge lines right. I'm using an 80 grit ceramic belt to get started out with. That's usually what I start with. What I'll do here is I'll get the plunge lines going and get about 2/3 of the way up for how high I want the bevels to go, and then I will switch to a 120 grit J-Flex belt, and I'll finish the rest by hand. At this point, I'm up to a 220 grit belt, and I'm just free grinding, taking the grind lines up to where they need to be, working on making sure that the plunge lines are right where they need to be. In order to do this, you'll notice I keep moving out of frame. Basically, I'm dipping it in water because that steel gets so hot. It's hard to hang on to. Post heat treat, it's really important to make sure it still stays cool. But before heat treat, it doesn't really matter too much, except for you have to hang on to it. And nobody likes to hang on to hot steel. Alright, so we are ready to get started with the heat treating process. I have already heated a paint bucket full of canola oil up to 120 degrees for the quenching, and now I'm getting the forge all heated up and ready to go. And the goal here is just to get an even heat, so I'm kind of moving around the flames a little bit, trying to make sure that I don't get just one hot spot. And now we are down into the canola oil for the quench.